I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary. Let's put God number one. Let's put religion number two. Love, I don't know. We got to put that number three, I guess, right? And then it's tariff. Because tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back that left us.
So a lot of us in AI and software, we're thinking, you know what, this whole tariff thing that Trump is kicking off doesn't concern us. But I think you're wrong. I think the tariff stuff does totally concern you. And today, Raul and I, we're going to go into basically the obvious stuff, the little bit less obvious stuff, and the completely non-obvious stuff of second and third order impacts coming from those Trump tariffs. Let's kick us off here, right? Kind of what's the obvious stuff, Raul? What is the other things that we're seeing right now?
So I think number one is the kind of the first level, the facts. And obviously, we're not going to bore you with like what are the tariffs and all that stuff. You've seen the beautiful table, which, by the way, I thought was so Trump-esque that he had a physical table.
The Sharpie was missing, but otherwise, yeah.
It would be slapstick if it wasn't real life. But either way, to more serious concerns. So what's actually happening and what are people saying will happen? Some economists from big universities and big name brands and all that stuff are estimating that GDP will drop quite strongly, especially in the longer term. So we're talking like to the 2050s. We're talking to the 2040s in there, up to minus 5 or 6% on the GDP, and wages specifically too. Even in the short term, though, there are some institutes, the Tax Institute, Wharton, and others, they're talking for wages up to minus 2% and for GDP as well. So this is quite important because these two things do concern you. Wages, not just personally, but for if you're a company as well, and GDP necessarily too.
And everyone is thinking like, hey, 2%, 3%, what do I care? I mean, some of that stuff is pushing some of the markets into recession territory, right? Let's be super clear. Kind of, we've seen the bear market happening already across all the major indices, and now there's a couple of things going the other direction, which is kind of great. I think the US-China talks are going seemingly in the right direction, but let's see about that, right? Kind of the UK deal that was announced last week basically took 3 years to put together. 3 years. Not 90 days or anything like this, 3 years, right? So I can only imagine how long it's going to take for the China thing to actually work itself out. So first of all, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you will be kind of impacted, either as a consumer by, paying more for your stuff, or basically working as a SaaS executive trying to sell into a more squeezed market, right? Kind of that's the first order. What are second order impacts actually of this, right? And the first thing that kind of came to my mind on the little bit further removed one is, well, we're already seeing supply chain disruptions, right? We're seeing some of the ports across the US basically empty. It's absolutely insane. Yeah. We're seeing that people are waking up and realizing, oh, wait a minute, this, rare earth stuff, that's only being produced in China. We kind of need this for chips. We need it for batteries. We need it for phones. We need it for all kinds of different things. And all of that suddenly is going to be more expensive or harder to access, right? So what does that mean for our SaaS folks and AI folks? Well, data center costs are probably going to go up, right? Kind of trying to build all of those chips that are basically running your code and then kind of helping your customers and so forth.
Just to jump in there, who needs data centers right now and who's building data centers out of their asses? AI.
Yeah.
So the US wants to be a big AI player, and also everyone's afraid of the US right now, but also others, of course. And they're slashing their data center profitability right now, and the costs of that are going up dramatically.
And what's the other thing that AI needs like crazy? Energy. There was an article, Sam Altman, I think in front of Congress or something like this, saying something very mathy, physicist kind of things, that, the energy consumption of AI will trend towards, energy consumption as a whole, which basically means it will kind of consume 99% of energy, like eventually, right? So whatever that means. What it still means for us today is that it's very, very power hungry, right? And kind of the whole disruption that's happening both on, the tariff side and then kind of how it plays out basically also impacts energy costs, how we're producing energy and then kind of trying to fuel the whole AI energy hunger that comes out of this will lead to higher cost for AI. And then the last one on the second order impacts, pretty straightforward, is you're selling to, maybe a FMCG company, maybe you're selling to a pharmaceutical company, maybe you're selling to a car manufacturer or something like this. They can't figure out where they're going to produce their stuff for the next 5 years right now. I don't think that they're in a mood right now to buy your software. I think any kind of decision that they can delay will be delayed because they have another big thing that they need to figure out, and frankly, they can't. Because this on and off again tariff world that we're living in right now basically kind of takes that ability of planning away from them. This is really, really important for us, in software world and AI world to kind of keep in mind. It's like, while we might not be impacted, our customers definitely are impacted.
And not just our customers here. So maybe you're sitting in the US. I know a big portion of the people who listen to this podcast are sitting in the US, but all over the world. And most likely your company is not just selling to people in the US. And if you're looking at the exports in themselves, there's also quite strongly the belief that exports to the EU especially will fall. Now, estimates for exports to Europe that are falling are just about 1%. But when it comes to SaaS and when it comes to the biggest markets, that number is way higher. So in the biggest markets in the EU, which is Germany, France, and the UK, estimates are going between -4% and -7% of exports, and technology is a big factor of that as well. It's also that at the same time your market is shrinking worldwide, and in the US, obviously your market is for whatever strategic reason. Maybe they're having difficulties buying, sourcing things. Maybe they're having difficulties producing. Is also facing challenges.
So let's go into the stuff that's even further away.
So I think the number one thing, maybe not as intuitive immediately, because obviously it's all about prices and exports and imports, is what is this doing to talent? And what is this doing to the mobility of talent and the availability of talent worldwide? Is maybe the USA's ability to attract talent shrinking in general? Now, there's multiple reasons why that can be, by the way, not just the tariffs in themselves, but overall, maybe the political climate, maybe the immigration climate and what's happening with that. But in general, that is a huge problem. Because for SaaS, for tech, and for whatever Silicon Valley or outside of Silicon Valley startup bubble you're in, international talent has and will be one of the main drivers of accelerated growth. And that talent simply will be more inclined to go elsewhere or remain remote and work for some other country.
We're seeing Denmark and Germany and France now launching campaigns to advertise to scientists basically that's sitting in Harvard and Stanford and Princeton and so forth. And so like, hey, if you don't like where you are right now, just come over here and do all of your wonderful, great work over here instead, right? But it's not only on the SaaS executive level, it's also on the cutting edge development level and scientific level, right?
I mean, look, so I'm sitting currently in Romania with my mother and grandmother visiting here. And one of the biggest problems of Romania, it's a very well-educated country, actually, coming from like communism and like mathematics and scientific education and all that stuff. But it's also at the same time experiencing, since however long I can think, massive brain drain. And that has been a problem, maybe the biggest problem actually, if you think about second and third term effects for this economy in the last 20, 30 years. Everyone who can think straight is going to Dublin and working for Google, is going to Berlin and working for whatever company, or is even going to the US. Now, I'm not saying it's going to get to that level, because there's many different reasons why that's the case here in Romania. But I know how bad brain drain is, not just for the economy, but also for politics. Yeah. Everyone with a brain is outside. The ones without a brain are leading the country right now. And if anywhere close to that is happening in the US...
Take the cue, US. Take the cue, you know.
If anywhere close to that is happening in the US, that is a bad thing. And that means very bad things for economy and politics as well.
So you just mentioned Google. They also, obviously, the Meta and Apple and a bunch of other really, high-tech companies. And while Apple is a bit affected because of their phones being, assembled in China and India, otherwise, technology-wise, those folks are kind of doing okay, at least on the first order impact, right? What actually has been forming in Europe for a longer time is trying to take money from Google and Meta that are basically rolling out their services across Europe without paying kind of any taxes, right? They have a couple of really nice schemes in place that basically makes the European entities have zero profit, despite, making billions of money, right? And because this has usually been seen as a pretty hostile act against the US, now it seems justified to push some of those policies forward to kind of find ways to tax or kind of create other kinds of tariffs for those services that are otherwise completely excluded from this whole tariff thing going back and forth, right? So what could that mean? Well, it could mean that your Google Cloud's costs are going to go up because suddenly the EU wants to have a cut of that. It could mean that your, I don't know, whatever service you're using from Meta or kind of other players, that those costs will simply go up because the EU now wants to have money for that. And I think people don't realize how this is part of the whole money flow and how, you know, it's kind of excluded from tariffs, but it's now opening a door in order to kind of go into this.
Maybe adjacent to that as well, and I don't know specifically, I haven't found any data on that, on what this will mean for VC and private equity and kind of the mobility of cash as well. But I'm just guessing here that it's probably not going to be positive, and I have some ideas of why that might be. If you think in a second order as well, so let's assume that VC is going to have a harder time coming to money through whatever the interest rate is going to be, which is tightening up as well, or going up as well, but also the availability of international cash. Now, if that's the case, who are one of the biggest buying groups of SaaS and technology right now? It is VC-backed companies and private equity-funded companies. Now, there's obviously a whole other market as well, but that is a significant portion of most SaaS companies that I've come across. So I've had this, one of my smarter thoughts that I've had in a while is if you're selling to a VC or a private equity-backed company that is still kind of in growth mode and still not profitable, to some extent, whatever you're selling is being paid directly by the VC money, not actually by the SaaS company, or by the VC funded company, but by the VC. So the VC is funding the fact that the company that they're funding is not profitable, and that money is going to you as Meta, that money is going to you for your advertising and for your SaaS. Now that money might also go down as well.
Yes. And, you know, the reason why that is obviously kind of impacted is those investors have the same planning problem as your normal customers, your normal enterprise or mid-market customers. They need to make bets for the next years to come. If they don't really know where the space is going, even though they're totally used to in a highly risky world, they will also kind of pull back their funding in order to achieve this. So I think this actually caps it up. I want to quickly run through the different things that people are completely forgetting when they're thinking about tariffs and their SaaS or software or AI company. And you shouldn't. And those hidden impacts will kick you in the butt if you're not prepared for that. Thanks for listening, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks, Raoul. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.